Hello and welcome to this BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT interview. Today I'm with Tony Neate, the Chief Executive of GetSafeOnline, the Security Awareness Initiative. Tony, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, good to be here.
Now, could you briefly, obviously GetSafeOnline is a security awareness initiative, could you just briefly explain to us what you do and what it does?
Yeah, we've been around for about 7-8 years now, and we're brought together by both government, law enforcement and the private sector to educate computer users. That's from children all the way up to civil servers and including small businesses. Now, we don't specifically look at child protection issues, but we do certainly look at child security issues.
Okay.
And it's getting together with the private sector that bring a lot of information to us, and also the integrity of law enforcement and the information from law enforcement and the backing of government as well. So we do it in a very informal, very clear, understanding way, with integrity, hopefully, and with independence.
Okay. So, obviously you do help not just children but all sort of people when they're going online, but what sort of things would you recommend that parents do to help keep their children safe online?
What I like to do is divide the internet into two specific areas. One is the hardware, so the machinery. Yeah. And now we're not just using desktops and we're using laptops, we're also using mobiles. And when it comes to mobiles, we now know that 55% of people access the internet from their mobiles. We need to secure those. So we need to secure the desktops, we need to secure the laptops, but also the mobiles. And I think an awful lot of people don't realise that some of these mobiles need securing as well. Then the second part is helping people secure themselves. So making sure that they know about the scams that are out there, the phishing emails, social networking, how they close their profiles down, the vissing scams that we're seeing now, which is cold calling scams, when people phone you up and say, I'm from a well-known computer vendor and you have a virus on there. So there's an awful lot to do. It's a massive area that we try to do, but we try to be a one-stop shop for people to come and get any sort of advice that they need to. Children are very important, but just like anyone else, silver surfers are very important as well.
Of course. Now, there's been a big move lately to improve the school curriculum in terms of computing. Do you think that there should be an element in that curriculum focusing on the security and making children aware of the risks online?
I think it's essential. I have no doubt that in 20, 30 years' time, we won't be talking about educating children because it will be a natural that we will be doing it. I think one of the problems we've seen over the last 10, 20 years is certain parents, and they're getting fewer, but certain parents were never brought up with the computers. And as a result, there can't be that parent-led education. Now, when I was younger, my parents taught me about crossing the road. I had the Tufty Club, but then there was the Green Cross Code Man, and they knew about it because they were taught by their parents. The problem now is that as parents, we were never brought up with computers, so we can't naturally do it. But the one thing we've got as parents, and I'm a parent, I'm also a grandfather, is that we're worldly wise. We know how to react to different things where children don't. So when parents say, oh, they're one step ahead of me, my children, they know more about it, that's not actually true, because you're a lot wiser. They do listen to, most parents are listened to at some point. Not always, but at some point. So it's about using that and educating, not telling people what to do, not telling your children what to do, but just talking to them and educating them about the whys and the wherefores, the goods and the bad. Because let's be honest, the internet is a fantastic place. I wouldn't be without it. I think it's done society a world of good. But like anything, there are some negatives. Just need to highlight those.
Sure. Now, there's been, I saw something in the news this week about the government and asking ISPs to start filtering content. Now, do you think that the government should be taking this role? Should that sort of thing happen? Should it be at that high level?
Yes, absolutely. A couple of years ago, the Lords Committee, Select Committee, looked at security, and one of the things they were talking about was who was responsible for security. Well, I believe we all are. That's just parents, the children themselves, suppliers of software and hardware, government, law enforcement, non-government organisations. We all have a responsibility to do something about it. So certainly I think we can. And I'm a big believer in the opt-out as opposed to opt-in. I think security should be turned on computers. When it comes to filtering of broadband access, I think it should be turned on, because we can always turn it off. That's the decision that we make. But have it put on as a norm. I'm part of a group that believes that is the right way to do it. And I know there are a lot of people who think that it's civil liberties. I don't see that. As a parent, as a grandfather, I think that that's a good way to be. We can always turn it off if we don't like it.
Yeah, because there was also a move to for people, if they wanted adult content, for example, that it would be turned off by default. But if you wanted it, you could then request it. Do you think maybe, or do you think that's maybe going a step too far?
I think we've got to look at these things. I think we've got to play it bit by bit. Certainly, if people know that all they've got to do, they haven't got to speak to anyone, they've just got to go into their settings and flick it back on again, I don't think that's too hard. Not if it means that we're protecting children. And we all have a major goal to educate children.
Okay. But off the back of this, do you think there is need for more legislation in this sort of area, just sort of to back up, to give all of this a bit more teeth?
No, I've never been I'm not a great one for legislation, even though I'm an ex-police officer. I think some of the legislation we have doesn't actually stop the reason the legislation was put in place. And I think there's very sufficient guidelines, rules, standards and laws that we can use to put this forward. But we've got to wait and see what the ISPs do and what the big CSPs do in relation to it. And hopefully they will, I think they are all coming to the table now and understanding that. But I think we've got to give them time to make that decision and to put it onto them. They've got to see the wealth of and the huge amount of push that the public want in relation to having this. And I think it's just a matter of time. And if they don't do it, then maybe the government will be looking at it and legislate in some areas.
You talked earlier about securing the mobile browsers. What sort of advice, how can we go about doing that? Because there aren't as many tools. You can lock down your browsers and stuff on a desktop, but not that I'm aware of, it's as easy to do on a smartphone, for example.
Well, I think it's very important that for one, that when we talk about updating our operating system, which is what you get from Apple when you use their operating system, or Windows. It's not just about updating that, it's updating applications. So your browsers need to be fully up to date. And the one good thing about up to now really about mobile is it's been a closed network. Now that we've been able to get outside that closed network, we've got to make sure. So, what I would tell people is go to a site. GetSafeOnline has the advice about how you update and how update your systems, update your laptops and your mobile phones. And if you have certain phones, like Android phones, they do need specific security. Others, not so much so. But it's knowing that, and if you know that, you can take a little bit of advice, know where to go to get that right information, where you can download that software to put on your mobile phone, to know that you're doing it securely. I think it's a very important thing. But keeping things up to date is vital in relation to the hardware side of protecting your computer.
And if you could give every parent in the nation one piece of advice on keeping their children safe online, what would that be?
Talk to your children. Let them know what's going on out there. We are a little bit wiser than the children, even though the children may think that's not quite true. We are. Do a little bit of research, find out what the threats are out there, and talk to your children about it. If you do nothing else, do that. But there's also software available now that you can put on your PCs, even put on their mobile phones, that will alert you if they change their status, if certain things happening. That's not being Big Brother. What that's doing is caring for your children. We would always ask our children where they're going. We would ask them what park they're going to, which friends they're going with. It's exactly the same on the internet now. Let's not be frightened of it. Let's ask the questions and share that experience with our children.
So it just comes down to maybe a lack of understanding on the parents.
I think it is. I think it's a lack of understanding, and the parents not thinking that they're clever enough to work this out. Well, they are, have no doubt. It wouldn't take too long. Yeah, there's some technical issues. And I regularly have discussions with people who say, children can hack into things. The majority of children are not interested in hacking into systems. They're not techies like that. They're interested, they want to do things, they know how the latest software that's out there, the latest games, the latest social media type things that are out there. But that's not to say that as parents, we're not wise to know how we can communicate with our children and educate them.
Because I just wonder what your thoughts are. Obviously, sites like Facebook, they have an age limit, but there are so many children on there who are clearly under 13. Now, surely, and the parents will have a profile, and their children have a profile. Do you think people don't understand the threats and the risks that their children are being faced with?
I have a slight problem with Facebook, and I understand where their issue is, because we all know that children go onto Facebook. My daughter is a deputy head of a school, And we did a bit of research in her school, and you know, over 60% of 70% of the children have a Facebook account. 50% of them had a mobile phone. We're talking about primary schools here. So they go on there. Now, when I've spoken to Facebook and I said to them, why don't you educate under 13-year-olds? They say, because they shouldn't be on there. And it's a data protection issue. So as such, we can't be seen to be educating people who shouldn't be using our systems. There's something not quite there right with that. We've got to be pragmatic. We know they're using it, and they're probably using it a lot younger than we think they are. I always go back to my 3 daughters. I remember talking to my wife and saying, "Is it time for the conversation of the birds and the bees with my daughter?" And my wife said to me, "Darling, I had that 4 years ago." Because I was that far out of date. We think that they're well advanced and they're maybe innocent and naive, but they're doing things that we don't realise. So keep an eye on them, see what they're doing. And if they are on Facebook, you're not going to stop it. But let's work with them to make sure that they protect themselves.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for your time, Tony.
Good speaking to you, Henry. And you.
Thank you.
All the best.